Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the regular meeting of Council to order. We are live now. Our clerk today will be Ms. Karen Robertson. There is a late item, Ms. Robertson.
Meeting, my apologies. We have delegation.
And that's the addition of the Community Charter, Reason 90, Sub 1N, the consideration of whether a council meeting should be closed under a provision of this subsection or subsection 2. I would now like a procedural motion to proceed in camera. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 22nd regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Karen Robertson. Tonight's regular meeting of Council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272, and Ministerial Order number M192 governing open meetings during a state of emergency, and the Provincial Health Officer Order regarding gatherings and events. Therefore, members of the public are required to observe meetings virtually and not attend in person. And question period will be suspended throughout the duration of the provincial health orders in effect. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items, and Ms. Robertson, we do have one.
Thank you, Worship. The item is under 12F. It's Development Permit Application Number DP 1209, and it's adding 3 delegations from Sean Rorison of BC Housing, Chad Zyla from S2 Architecture, as well as Mike Ryan from S2 Architecture.
Thank you very much. A motion for approval of the agenda is amended. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Armstrong. All those in favour? Any opposed? Motion carries. A motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Martman. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Mayor's report tonight. I have a number of items, but I will try and be brief. The first is the Walk-On Winter Wellness Challenge that runs from February 8th to March 19th, sponsored through the city. The City of Nanaimo's Parks, Recreation and Culture and New Balance Nanaimo have partnered to bring the Walk-On Winter Wellness Challenge to the community. It will take participants on a walking journey from Nanaimo to Victoria and beyond. The challenge will take place from February 8th to March 19th, 2021. Of course, obviously, you're not expected to actually walk to Victoria physically, but you are expected to do the walking in town, wearing a device that will record that. And of course, as always, key participants are reminded to follow COVID-19 safety protocols and are encouraged to track their steps during the challenge for a chance to win prizes from the New Balance Nanaimo and Nanaimo's Parks, Recreation and Culture. So a good, healthy winter activity. As many of you know, on February 12th, Minister Heyman, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change Strategy, announced approval of Nanaimo's Checkout Bag Regulation Bylaw 2020 number 7283, and it will return to Council for adoption with a date effective July 1st, 2021. It will encourage the use of reusable bags by eliminating use of plastic bags and sets fees for paper bags and new reusable bags. Paper bags will need to contain at least 40% post-consumer recycled content and be labeled as recyclable. And given the level of confusion that seems to often surround the most innocent and progressive steps undertaken by Council, listen everyone, you can still use plastic garbage bags and we expect you to use your city containers accordingly. So don't worry. This is a very good step. It's a small step, but in reducing our individual carbon footprint, we reduce our collective carbon footprint, which is good for the planet and good for the city. I am delighted to announce again what was publicized earlier last week, and that is the appointment of Tim Doyle as Nanaimo's new fire chief. It was a search that drew dozens of applications from across the country, and the City of Nanaimo was very pleased to select Deputy Chief Doyle as its new fire chief. He has been with the Nanaimo Fire Rescue for the last 20 years and serving as Assistant Chief from 2014 to 2017 until his appointment as Deputy Chief in 2017. He fills the big shoes of our much loved and respected Karen Fry, who I understand is pleased by the appointment as well, so I think the city's made a good choice. I am also want to mention, as I have on previous occasions, a few remarks and make a few remarks around COVID-19. The message from Island Health is pretty straightforward. 50% of BC residents don't follow the public health orders all the time, claiming personal actions don't put anyone at risk. And as Island Health says, when dealing with the pandemic, it's not about you, it's about us. Not wearing a mask in the grocery store, you're putting people at risk. Not washing your hands or using hand sanitizer, you're putting people at risk. Socializing with groups or those outside your home or core bubble, you're putting people at risk. Traveling for social or tourism reasons, you're putting people at risk. Bottom line, if you're breaking the rules, you're putting people at risk. Even the Premier's issued a message now that says it's time for all of us to be good neighbors. I realize how frustrating it is getting for many folks, and it feels like the never-ending Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. But we have kept our numbers relatively low, although the Central Island in the last few weeks has seen quite an uptick in comparison to other parts of the province, particularly associated with mass gatherings. So please, do the right thing for all of us. The Mounties want to hear from you about crime in your neighborhoods. The RCMP, in partnership with the City of Nanaimo and fourth-year criminology students, will be conducting safety audits in selected neighborhoods throughout Nanaimo. Safety audits have been utilized in many cities throughout Canada and the U.S. and have been found to be quite effective in addressing safety challenges in any neighborhood. For some residents in Nanaimo, there is an increased feeling of fear that comes with an increase in crime activity. Over time, this has been shown to undermine safety and security in our communities, weaken the cohesiveness of neighborhoods, says Christy Wood, Nanaimo's RCMP Community Policing Coordinator. The goal of the project is to work in partnership with neighborhoods to find ways to reduce opportunities for crime and incorporate relevant crime prevention programming. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the Health and Housing Task Force having completed its mandate. And I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Bonner in just a second, along with Co-Chair Hemmons, to the two councillors who helped work on this. Last week, Nanaimo City Council has received, if you will, the recommendations for Council's consideration. The City Council-led Health and Housing Task Force, comprised of Sinixic First Nation, Island Health, BC Housing, Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce, along with a number of not-for-profits and organizations, completed its mandate. A key deliverable was to create a health and housing action plan that outlines priorities for Nanaimo and identifies targets, gaps, costs to address the current and projected needs for our vulnerable population. The task force has recommended that Council endorse the action plan, which was presented to Council at the Governance and Priorities Committee meeting earlier this afternoon. One thing I want to say before I turn it over is the action plan recommends the creation of the Health and Housing Governance Board to oversee the implementation of the plan. Another recommendation is found in the action plan is the establishment of a funders table with the aim of securing $65.5 million to meet Nanaimo's health and housing needs over the next 5 years. Again, around misinformation, I want to emphasize the City of Nanaimo is not budgeting itself $65.5 million. But we are certainly going to ask the levels of government that have the jurisdictional and legal responsibility to step up to the plate and coordinate their spending in a way that effectively uses significant monies that have already been spent and are being spent with not much improvement in sight for a number of our fellow citizens, we estimate over 600, who are without housing in Nanaimo. This is an important task force. It represented a great deal of work. I will leave the last words to the councillors, but I think on behalf of a very grateful city and a grateful council, a thank you to them, to the participants in the task force, to city staff who worked tirelessly for over a year on this, and Dr. Alina Turner in order to ensure that we received a very important report that gives us the way forward. Councillor Bonner, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I would like to thank all the people that participated in the task force. We had representations from the federal government. We had representations from the province. BC Housing was there, Island House was there, Sonoma First Nation was there, the First Nations Health Authority was there. We had agencies there from the John Howard Society, Canadian Mental Health, United Way. And we also had the great work done by Dr. Alina Turner. Probably a few of those folks I even forgot. We also had a lot of work done by staff, and I'd like to thank them for that. I think if I can say, speaking from the person that health and housing is not my greatest forte, I'm a website designer, but if I learned anything from this experience, it was that the work that we're going to start out on cannot be done by one organization alone. And the work to house and prioritize the health needs of our most vulnerable in our community needs to be a work done by partnership. And that partnership starts at the very ground of the agencies that work with those folks. It starts with the organizations that help those agencies, the fundraisers, the like Rotary and United Way, those type of agencies. But it also requires a partnership with the city and of the province and the federal government. And I think that coming out of this task force and this report, we now have the groundwork for a very good partnership where we will create made in Nanaimo solutions to what is afflicting the most vulnerable in our town. And so I want to thank everybody for participating in this great work, and I look forward to starting what is obviously going to be a very tough job going forward. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you for your words, and thank you for your work, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Worship. I was actually happy to have Dawn speak on behalf of the task force, but I will say that it was wonderful to be asked, and I'm grateful, and I felt privileged to be able to do that work on behalf of my colleagues at this table. So thank you, and thank you to you, Dawn, for chairing.
Thank you, everyone. Nothing to rise and report. We have no presentations. Committee minutes are just for receipt. Motion for adoption of consent items. Moved Councillor Hemmens, seconded Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item is delegations unrelated to agenda items, and we have no delegations. Item 12, reports, council resolution to the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities regarding restorative justice programs. Mr. Lindsay, you've got a bit of a report for us tonight, please.
Good evening. Thank you, Your Worship. Just simply an information report for Council, some background on an item that I know Council was debating for an AVICC resolution. Certainly happy to take any questions on the report.
I think the report was well received, well written, and self-explanatory. Thank you very much. I see no questions or comments. The next is the item 12B, 2020-2024 Financial Plan Bylaw. Ms. Legan, good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I am going to turn it over right away to Ms. Mercer, and the purpose of this report is to introduce the Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw 2020, number 7307.02 for the first, second, and third reading this evening. And not to be confused, it deals with the 2020 to 2024 financial plan, even though it is named Bylaw 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mercer, good evening.
Thank you, Your Worship. So throughout the year, we make changes to the budget that weren't included in the one that was passed by May 15th. So we've made no amendments to the bylaw throughout the year, so this one encapsulates all the changes that were made during the year. So between May 11th and December 31st, this report lists all the additions as well as the transfers between projects. So I'll kind of give a highlight of the report. So Council was made aware of most of the changes to the budget, the additions. The ones that didn't come to Council's attention consisted of small dollar private contributions and grants. There were 2 land purchases, and the largest change was the $3 million addition to the Fire Station Number 1 upgrade. And that was approved by Council in June. And as I said, Attachment A outlines all the changes that were made between projects during the year. So if one was over budget and one was under, we would do transfers between those. Some of those were brought to your attention, but the smaller ones don't. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions? Seeing none, Councillor Brown, what's his name? Councillor Gesselbrock, my apologies. I'm just so excited to be here this evening. No.
That the Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 7307.02, to amend the 2020-2024 Financial Plan pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Gesselbrock.
That the Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 7307.02, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to get it straight here. We're passing a budget here for last year that money we've already spent. We're just trying to make it all balance out to zero.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Well, we're hoping for a small surplus, actually. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Gesselbrock.
That the Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 7307.02, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. The next is the public hearing policy. Ms. Robertson, you'll be introducing that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. As part of the policy project that I've been working on, one of the items that I mentioned would be coming forward in the end of October was a public hearing policy, a new one. And that's because the existing one outlines how correspondence is received. However, it does not flesh out how the information can be received and how the hearing is conducted. And this has caused a number of questions in the past, especially when we were trying to encounter our public hearing process during COVID times. So the new policy, a couple of the highlights include, it identifies the 4 ways that the submissions can be received. It indicates a time change for when submissions can be received. Currently, we've been allowing submissions to come in as late as 4 o'clock, and that makes it really challenging for not only council to process that information prior to the hearing, but also for staff to actually get the information compiled, put it into the binder, and get it all together and get it onto the website, because the public has a right to see all that information. There was also clarification, because there was some confusion about how long the applicant gets versus the people to speak. And so it identifies that the applicant would be given an opportunity to present the application for 10 minutes. The applicant always has the opportunity to have a longer period of time when they first introduce their application to council at first and second readings. And that's when they would do their PowerPoint and get into a little bit more of an extensive presentation. Staff have put forward a proposed time frame of 3 minutes for members of the public to speak, but having said that, it does not limit the amount of time, the number of times people could come forward, and that time was selected because generally most people can convey their thoughts, whether they're in favor or opposed, within 3 minutes. And it also does not preclude the chair at the beginning of any meeting to increase that time. However, if you put in the policy for 5 minutes, it's pretty difficult to indicate at the beginning of a meeting while we're reducing it down to 3. So it's very helpful in contentious public hearings and very helpful when we have numerous public hearings in one night. But that is certainly up for council's debate. There's also a bit of clarification on the decorum procedures outlined in the policy to ensure that staff, or not that staff, that members of the public feel safe in expressing their views without feeling intimidated. And other than that, if council is supportive of the policy, then the necessary amendments would be made public on the city's website with the details, as well as the automated response for the emails that would identify what the policy has states, and any materials that are circulated as part of the procedures.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robertson. Councillor Gesselbrock, Armstrong, and Hemmens in that order.
I move that council endorse the public hearing process policy as attached to the February 22nd, 2021 report by the Deputy City Clerk.
Now we have a seconder, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Gesselbrock, do you want to speak to it? No. Councillor Armstrong then, please.
I had a question because we talked about like the process for the public hearing, but I was wondering about the process for the notification, because it's right now, I think ours is very limited, like what is it, 200 meters or something? 200 meters? Like I would like to see that expanded, because a lot of these projects have a huge impact within a kilometer. I thought that was going to be looked at, or is that something different?
Mr. Lindsay.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Armstrong. So certainly those rules are governed by your procedures and notification bylaw, and a review of that bylaw is in the work plan for this year, so we'd hopefully bring that forward to council. And it governs such things as the distance of notifications and signage on properties for various applications. So
Thank you.
we'll come forward.
Answers that nicely.
Ask and it shall be given, Councillor Armstrong, in due course. Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm generally in support of the changes, but I'm not a fan of the 3 minutes. Currently, for our public hearing process, do we allot 5, or is it open?
Ms. Robertson.
The practice has been for 5, but it's certainly, under the Local Government Act, it is up to the chairperson. He has the discretion to make whatever time frame he would like at the beginning of the meeting. So it's been silent so far, but it's just been, I think, practiced to be 5 minutes. It does present some problems if you do have a larger public hearing, but that's certainly council's call.
Thank you. The reason I struggle with it is we do a lot, obviously, as this council, but one of our primary jobs is to listen to people. And I think this is one of the few times that people will actually come out and address us and stand at the podium and look at us and share their thoughts with us. And so I hear that there's provisions for people to come back up to the podium multiple times, but I think this, without, if it's not spoken about now, but it's a current practice of 5 minutes and folks are comfortable with that, I'm not sure why we're looking to reduce it. I haven't heard any public input that, you know, we'd like that reduced. And I just think it's a fundamental piece of what we do. And so I personally would like to see 5 minutes remain as the speaking time.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. If I may talk to that thing, I think because it was silent before, it wasn't set to anything, and it was just given 5 at the time. If it was set to 3, we could always make it 5 if we chose at the meeting, I'm guessing,
Absolutely.
right? Okay. So that's my understanding of it. Anyway, my question is in terms of the public engagement. A while ago, this council voted not to do video public hearings and not to accept online presentations. I voted against that and was defeated. And then the province backed me up a little while later and made everybody do video public hearings. There was a COVID thing happened in between then. And so I'm wondering, since we're now doing that, we are doing our public hearings and we are streaming them, could we just carry on doing that afterwards? Are we going to go right back to the way things were before?
I'm trying to remember. So right now, we're doing the videotaping, but there are issues with personal information. People are citing their addresses. It's very specific to their addresses, and it's very difficult when you're going out into the World Wide Web to have your personal address out there, where right now it's just for the purposes of the hearing, and then it's over and concluded. So that's the reason for not keeping them on our city's website for future reference.
Oh, no, it wasn't that. It was like, we voted not to stream the meetings at all, and now we are. And so I'm wondering if we could just continue on doing this practice, because it seems to be working, as opposed to going back to the way it was before.
Perhaps someone from Development Services would like to respond to that one.
Mr. Holm, good evening.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. Yeah, I believe the policy as it's drafted actually envisions that that could be the case, that the provision for streaming of public hearings would continue, and the online engagement that's been provided by the province through the pandemic. There may be some changes required at the provincial level, some continuation of allowances there, but the policy, I believe, as drafted, would allow for that to continue.
I want to say in response, and there's quite a list of speakers here, that I appreciate the advertising of public hearings and it being filmed and people being able to see it, but on the flip side, we certainly don't expect that your vote, which is a private matter, is made public. And the only people who are paid at public hearings, apart from the proponents and maybe their staff, so to speak, or their architect or whatever, the only people paid at a public hearing are the politicians whose vote is publicly recorded and publicly available. But we're paid to do that. Members of the public who wish to make their views known don't get paid. They simply put their privacy at risk and face the approbation of their neighbors. I mean, it's a great philosophical topic, and I'm happy to revisit it again, but we won't do it tonight. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I'm in favor of 3 minutes. I think it's very fair. I think 5 minutes is too long because a lot of that will keep you to the points. You take a look, when we go to the UBCM, you only have 2 minutes, and that's on making huge changes to provincial legislation. I think a lot of times when people come up, they spend too much time on hearsay and on old stuff, whereas if you can't get your point across in 3 minutes, I think we got a problem. And it would also allow more people to come forward to do that. I think 5 minutes, from my perspective, is too long. If you take a look at some of the councils around the province, you're only allowed to speak 3 minutes yourself. So I think.
Sorry.
I said I think 3 minutes is very fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I actually agree with Councillor Hemmons. And part of the reason why for public engagement and when we have people come to our public hearings, I agree that most of the time we can get the information probably out in 3 minutes for those that are used to speaking. But people who are not used to speaking may take a little bit longer to be able to compose their thoughts, or they may need 3.5 minutes, or they may need 4. I don't think so far in our experience at council, we haven't really had any public hearings except for maybe 1 or 2 where we had full audience. I don't want to switch back and forth between 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Somebody said, well, we could put it in for 3, but we could also say, well, we could increase it to 5. I've found that to be very confusing for people in the public. We have to keep it standardized. Whatever we say, we have to stick to it. Because otherwise you'll say, we'll hear from people who say, well, you gave those people 5 minutes at that last meeting, why are you only giving us 3 minutes now? So I actually support the 5 minutes, but I'll leave it at that and see what everybody else has to say.
Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Councillor Martman, and you stole my argument there. I think we can't say it's going to be 3 minutes and then, oh, for whatever reason, today it's 5. That doesn't strike me as good process, and I think, you know, I get criticized, stick to your knitting. There's a core number of things that we as council do, and this is the core of what we do, is sit at this table and listen to residents. And I think of my, you know, my elderly next door neighbor, they're not going to be able to stand at that podium for 3 minutes and give me a cogent argument about how a bylaw is impacting their life, because they don't have that, the comfort that we do at UBCM when we're given 2 minutes, because we know we have to do that. I just think this is a courtesy, yeah, thank you.
Ms. Robertson, did you want to add something else before I get to Councillors Thorpe and Turley?
Not unless council has no further questions.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I asked Ms. Robertson actually about this prior to the meeting privately. I'm okay with the 3-minute rule in the policy on the understanding that at the chair's discretion, and I think that would depend largely on the number of people wanting to speak to a certain topic. If we have a room full of people, 100 people here, then I think it would serve us well to have a 3-minute time limit. And it might force people to have their thoughts in order and be concise in their speaking points, given also that they would be allowed to come back a second time if they had additional points to add. That way you could move through the crowd much more efficiently. But on the other hand, if we only had 2 or 3 people wanting to speak, the mayor, at his discretion, could simply say, look, I'm willing to give people 5 minutes because obviously there's not a lengthy speaking list. So I'm okay with the 3 minutes in the policy on the understanding that there is flexibility and the good judgment of the chair would be involved there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Turley.
Yeah, Your Worship, I'm in favor of the 3 minutes because I think it's imperative to try to force citizens to actually come prepared. Some of the stuff we hear during the 5 minutes are less than complimentary, and if they're forced to leave that stuff out, it's probably a good idea. The 3 minutes, there's no reason why they can't practice ahead of time before they get here to prepare what they want to say, and I'm sure it can be done in most cases in 3 minutes, and if not, they can come up with a different argument to add to a second speaking. So I don't see a problem with it.
Councillor Hemmens again.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to move an amendment to the motion referring to the public being provided 5 minutes each to express their views on a proposed application.
And there's a seconder? I'll second. Councillor Martman. Is there any need for discussion? All those in favor of changing it from 3 to 5? And those opposed? Councillor Brown?
I'm in favor of the amendment.
You're in favor of the 3 minutes? 5. Of the 5?
I'm in favor of the amendment that was proposed to raise it from 3 minutes to 5.
The amendment passes. On the main motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I didn't even get to tell you how I felt. Public hearing policy.
Sorry, Your Worship, may I ask a question to Ms. Robertson?
Sure.
Thank you. Through you. So then as a follow-up to this discussion, Ms. Robertson, having put 5 minutes in our policy, and let's assume that there is a controversial public hearing and we do have a room full of people, does the chair have the discretion to then say, I'm going to limit people to 3 minutes for the sake of brevity, again on the understanding that they could come back and speak again? Could you clarify that?
The chair certainly could do that as well. The challenge is, of course, if people have prepared for 5 minutes, it becomes difficult to move it to 3, which is the reason for the 3, and it's easy to expand to 5. However, if certainly the chair can state at the beginning, if there's a number of people in the room, that for tonight's purposes, it will be 3 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you. Further to the question of Councillor Thorpe, when we get delegations who wish to speak, people don't sign up, so they don't necessarily know that they're going to be speaking at a public hearing, do we? Because I'm just wondering if there's a way to say, okay, this is going to be a controversial issue. There's probably going to be a lot of speakers on it. Can we give everybody a heads up? We're going to stick with the 3 minutes, or we're going to reduce it to 3?
That would be challenging because it's at the chair's discretion to make that determination, so it would be at the chair's call.
I see. Okay. Just curious.
Are we done with the debate after we've passed the motion? Just teasing. Development permit application number DP 1146-3201 Lauren Mary Place. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to actually pass the next 4 items over to Director Holm to introduce.
Sorry, just prior to moving forward, we had the vote on the amendment, but did council make a vote? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, speeding things along here. Mr. Holm.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so this development permit is for property on Lauren Mary Place, which is in the Barrington Road and Barrington Road area off Rock City Drive. It includes 3 buildings, 13 units within 3 buildings, and 10 of those are actually 3-bedroom units as well. So that's nice to see in the way of family housing in the area in a different form. The property's within the steep slope development permit area, and the proposal's been designed to comply with the steep slope development permit area guidelines. If you could bring up attachment E, I can give you an idea of, thank you, I can give you an idea of how the buildings have been designed to comply with the steep slope development permit area guidelines. They nicely step along the terrain of the site, and so mimic the terrain with the building stepping down, and they appear to be 3 stories from the street, and they step down to 2 stories in the rear. The site characteristics in the area are treed slopes, rocky outcrops, and this proposal responds well with 3 buildings sensitively designed to fit within the slope. The proposal does include height variances, and that's to accommodate the building stepping into the slope and mimicking the terrain in the area. The height variances also allow for a more compact building form. They range from 1.7 meters, 2.3 meters, and 2.77 meters. Height variance is requested, and a very minor rear yard variance for Block 1 as well. Staff support the proposal, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Armstrong.
Just wanted to move the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None, motion carries. Thank you. The next is development permit application number DVP 1196-1174 Island Highway South. Mr. Holm, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is an application from the Regional District of Nanaimo, and it's to provide for an above-grade valve station. It's replacing an existing underground valve station that services the sanitary sewer pump station on the property. As you can see on the map overhead, the property's on Island Highway South at Halliburton. And the proposed pump station upgrade improves accessibility for maintenance purposes and long-term access for repair and replacement of the valve works within the building. It's a small footprint that's proposed, 30 square meters, and it encroaches into the required setback for the Chase River. If you could bring up attachment D, I'd appreciate it. That will show the location of the building relative to the existing pump facility, the sewer pump facility. The proposal does not affect any existing vegetation within the riparian area. It's an already disturbed site. You can see the pump station or the valve building there that's proposed adjacent to the pump station in between the existing pump station and the Chase River. The proposal also includes fencing, the relocation of a gravel pathway, vegetative planting within the riparian area, and removal of invasive species. It's consistent with the development permit area guidelines that apply, and staff support the proposal. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock? I just want to keep awake.
That council issue development permit number DP 1196 at 1174 Island Highway South with a variance to reduce the minimum required watercourse setback from 30 meters to 15.5 meters for the proposed valve station building at the Chase River Pump Station.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is development permit application number DP 1209-702 Nickel Street. Mr. Holm again.
Thank you, Your Worship. This application, I won't say too much about this. We have a number of delegations waiting to speak to it on the project development team. But this is obviously the first of the BC Housing MOU supportive housing projects to come forward for consideration. And it's located at Nickel and Robbins, proposes 59 supportive housing units and community meeting space. And I'm happy to say more, answer questions if you have any, but I believe the delegation is well prepared to speak to it.
Thank you very much. We have three delegations. The first is Sean Rorson, BC Housing. The second is Chad Zyla, I hope I pronounced that correctly, S2 Architecture, and the third is Mike Ryan, S2 Architecture. Gentlemen, I assume you're all listening at the same time. It's 5 minutes, and I'll tell you at 1 minute. You've got a minute left. But if you don't feel the need to take the 5, no one will be upset. So, Mr. Rorson, please, can you proceed?
Yes, thank you very much. And I believe Chad Zyla will be speaking to the design element of this first. No one will be upset.
We haven't heard anything up until now, so. If you're intending to share your screen, it's not working, and if you're talking, we're not hearing, or.
Good afternoon, this is Chad Zyla. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead, please.
Wonderful. Okay, I've been told I do not have slides or cannot share slides, so I will be speaking to designs that have already been provided. I'm an architect and associate with S2 Architecture. I will be providing a brief presentation for the 702 Nicole Street submission. Okay, again, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You carry on, please.
Okay,
We can't hear you now.
Okay.
We can see your
Perfect.
first slide.
There's
Unfortunately, you're cutting in and out. And you appear to be muted at the present time, if I can see the screen correctly.
Yeah, there's a real delay between when I speak. Okay. Okay. This project is a supportive housing facility for the homeless. Mike, do you want to jump in? This project is a supportive housing facility for the homeless population of Nanaimo. We are working with BC Housing and their
I think
Yeah.
we're all going to be very glad we read the staff report carefully because we're not having much success with hearing you, and we're still on slide 1.
Yeah. Let's try this again.
Your Worship, could we just mention for the benefits of the delegations that there is a delay. So if you're trying to watch our live stream at the same time, you're going to have a delay. So if you turn off the live stream and just participate through the Zoom call, it should help.
Did you hear that? There is a delay. If you turn off your live screen and just do the job, we'll hear you, and if we can't, I'll wave my hands or something, or someone will indicate to you you're not getting through. So let's start again.
Okay, let's try this one more time.
I like the sound.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay, I'll try one more time. Sorry about that.
No.
The project is a supportive housing facility for the homeless population of Nanaimo. We're working with BC Housing and their local operator to provide this facility to help people who require housing and support assistance. The building will be completed with modular construction from factory-built components that will be assembled on site. The site is a brownfield site reclaimed from an old gas station. The front property line faces Island Highway to the east. The proposed building will be 4 stories in height and include 58 studio units, a 2-bedroom family unit, and support and amenity spaces on the main floor, along with a generous community amenity space. Per direction from Nanaimo Planning, we are removing the vehicular access points off of Island Highway. We have located the building facing onto Island Highway to address the street and to encourage a pedestrian-friendly environment. The building is set back 4.5 meters from the front property line in response to Ministry of Transportation requirements. This positioning of the building allows for vehicular access from the north off of Robin Street and for a private outdoor amenity space for the residents at the back of the building. We have provided convenient pathway access from public walks on adjacent streets and from parking to principal entrances. Waste and recycling has been located at the back of the site and is screened by landscaping and the building. Our original concept proposed 4 surface stalls. However, in response to community feedback, we have reworked our site plan to increase the parking count to 7. Please note, the parking stalls will be primarily utilized by staff as the residents likely will not have their own vehicles. Recognizing that biking is likely a key mode of transportation, we have provided secure bicycle parking for tenants towards the rear of the site. We appreciate that the maximum building height for the zoning is 14 meters. We are proposing a 15.57 meter 4-story building. The reason for this is because modular buildings are often taller than typical structures in response to the increased depth of modular floor and ceiling assemblies which occur at each level. The building features a covered entryway in order to provide an inviting approach that protects visitors, staff, and residents from the elements. The building massing and elevations generally received positive feedback from the design advisory panel. However, comments were made requesting that we consider adding to the residential look and feel of the building. In response, we adjusted the articulation of the building composition by shifting the location of materials. We defined 2 strong wood elements that highlight the principal entry to the building and the second principal entry to the community amenity space. We further articulated the massing by defining the top level with gray panels that are set back from the predominant white articulated grid. These details are continued as vertical elements along the sides of the building. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much. Are we going to hear from Mr. Ryan?
I was presenting for both of us. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe you said everything.
Well, we don't mind that. Any questions for the delegation? Thank you very much, gentlemen. I appreciate your attendance tonight. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We are getting this system fixed and replaced. It's in the budget. Thank God. Councillor Gesselbrock, would you care to?
Would, is it just read out the entire recommendation?
Yes.
Move that council issue development permit number DP 1209 at 702 Nicole Street, subject to the city receiving a freeze release from the Ministry of Environment with the following variances. Increase the maximum permitted building height from 14 meters to 15.6 meters. Increase the maximum permitted fence height from 1.8 to 3.3 in the rear yard. Reduce the minimum required landscape buffer from 1.8 meters to 0 meters on portions of the side property lines, and reduce the minimum required parking spaces from 12 spaces to 7 spaces. And that, one.
I would think it's appropriate to take it as separate motions, Ms. Robertson. Yes, I think so. We'll have a seconder then, please. Seconder, Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion on this motion? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Just going to put on my glasses here. Mr. Harding was able to loan me one of his many pairs of glasses so I could read this thing.
They're for visioning exercises.
My question is, I'm not sure of what a freeze release is. And is this because this is the ministry has control over this area, or the Ministry of Environment? How does that work?
Mr. Homel on Chillis.
Thank you. Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Bronner's question, this was formerly the site of a gas station, so it's under a certificate of compliance, which is a sort of an approval for related to remediation of the site as a former gas station, a contaminated site. So the Ministry of Environment has sort of frozen development approvals until on the site until they're going to spell out conditions, I guess, to the developer, in this case the province, as to what they need to do to have the freezing of development approvals lifted for the site under the provisions of the contaminated sites regulations. Does that help?
Yeah, that makes more sense. Thanks, I appreciate that. My other question was regarding the parking spaces. And I'm wondering if, I mean, it's too late now. I mean, this is where it's going to be, and I'm fine with this. But do we even need 7? I'm thinking 4 would have been plenty.
Yeah, I can. Well, they've, if I could, through the chair, to the traffic assessment that was done, the parking needs assessment that was done for the facility identified, I believe, 13 spaces as the potential demand. Our bylaw requires 12 spaces. They started with 4 spaces on the site. They originally had 4 spaces because there was a permanent heat treatment facility identified to be sited on the property. Now BC Housing is proposing because of they have a number of sites under proposal for development. They'll be able to have a mobile heat treatment facility. So they were able to accommodate 3 additional parking stalls on site, which, as their traffic engineer had indicated, would allow more parking on site and less impact on parking on adjacent streets. They did say that the adjacent streets had the capacity to provide the on-street parking, but they are able to accommodate 7 out of the 12 required stalls on site.
Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock, did you wish to speak to it? Councillor Armstrong.
I just wanted to know, are they going to be entering into a good neighborhood agreement, as is normally the case with these?
There will be a community advisory committee that will be developed. It's sort of in the works with the facility operator, BC Housing, the neighborhood, and the city as well as a player. So there's a community advisory committee that will be developed for each of the facilities.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, all those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Brown, you're in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock?
That housing agreement bylaw 2021, number 7322, to secure unit affordability, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock?
That housing agreement bylaw 2021, number 7322, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Gesselbrock?
That housing agreement bylaw 2021, number 7322, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
That council directs staff to register a covenant on the title of the land to reinforce the terms of the housing agreement.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. The next is Development Variance Permit Application Number DVP 411-1768 Regina Way. Mr. Holm.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a development variance permit to permit an overheight retaining wall and fence that's been built in conjunction with the retaining wall on a residential property. The proposed, or the existing, I guess, retaining wall and fence are within the side and rear yard on the property, and they exceed the permitted height under the zoning bylaw. No negative implications are anticipated as a result of the proposed variance, and as well, notification has taken place as required under council's procedure and notification bylaw. Happy to take any questions, but yeah, notification's taken place, and recommendation is for approval.
Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Your Worship. So my understanding of this file is that a retaining wall was built and to height, and then they put a fence on top. And now we need to bring that fence into whatever we bring it into to say it's, yeah, compliance, thank you. We're now giving them a variance. So fence is built, it exists, and we're kind of back, we're going back. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Move that council issue development variance permit number DVP411 at 1768 Regina Way with the following variance. Increase the maximum combined height for retaining wall and fence permitted within the rear and side yard setbacks from 2.4 meters to 5.41 meters.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next are bylaws. The checkout bag regulation bylaw 2020 number 7283. Councillor Gesselbrock.
I'd like to move, whereas under section 8.3J of the Community Charter, the Council of the City of Nanaimo may by bylaw regulate.
Just the shorter version.
Therefore be it resolved.
Motion that checkout bag regulation bylaw. Sometimes having that old-fashioned paper really is wonderful.
Yes. Motion that checkout bag regulation bylaw 2020 number 7283 to regulate single-use checkout bags be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion? Councillor Thorpe.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you, if I may, a couple of questions to Mr. Sims, I believe. So I'm basically in support of this, but I want to be assured that there has been correspondence and an outreach to our business community, Mr. Sims, regarding the implications. And maybe you could just assure me of that. And I'd be especially interested in any feedback or information you've received or commentary you've received from our major food wholesalers or retailers, I should say.
Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'd just like to acknowledge Council's leadership on bringing this bag bylaw to fruition. It's very exciting. It's been a long time in coming, and but specifically to Councillor Thorpe's questions, throughout 2019, the city staff engaged with the Chamber of Commerce and a number of businesses and had quite an extensive consultative process with the public as well as business. And it was very positively received at that time. And likewise, so there's already this movement within the business community towards shifting behaviors. And since the bylaw has been in front of the minister, we've been engaging with the Chamber of Commerce. So I really have to acknowledge the wonderful support that the Chamber of Commerce has been in bringing this forward. So we're working closely with them to help the businesses transition. As you know, the effective date of the bylaw is July the 1st of this year. We're cognizant that there may be some challenges with the supply chain due to COVID, just like everything else in the world. So the focus is going to be on education and helping businesses comply. But we think that many of them are already, including the grocery stores, are already well down that road. Yes, I think the communications is going to be jointly crafted with the Chamber of Commerce, and we'll also reach out to other businesses that may not be members through our business licensing group. So I hope that just, our as I say, our focus is really on educating and making this successful.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. If I may have a follow-up, Your Worship. The reason for my question is that my understanding is that our bylaw actually goes beyond what federal legislation is proposing in terms of banning biodegradable plastics and compostable plastic bags. And so that's my concern, that some local food stores especially, who have been making an effort to move in that direction, thinking that they're doing a good thing and have done enough, are now going to be told, sorry, that's not enough, and that is not acceptable. So have you heard any comeback on that?
Your Worship, we have not heard specific that I'm aware of. That not to say that the pushback doesn't exist, but I would note that there's no hard and fast standards around compostable or biodegradable. Biodegradable means that there's still going to be plastic left in the environment, and compostable, the federal government and the ministers of climate change, or the Ministry of Environment across the country, are working on a standard for the word compostable, but it's still voluntary. So there's a lot of up in the air about compostable or biodegradable. So the main concern is, it reminds me an awful lot of the term flushable wipes. There ain't no wipes that are flushable. So I'm a little jaded when it comes to biodegradable or compostable. So I think that having said all of that, there's this effort, a good faith effort on the part of many businesses that will want to respect, but help them understand that just like flushable wipes, maybe compostable or biodegradable bags ain't. And I would say at this point, the federal government is still working on that definition. They don't have it sort of hard and fast.
All right, I appreciate the information. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Well, thank you. That was, my concern was the compostable bags as well, because the feds are allowing that. And I know that Overweighty and those owned by the Pattison Group have gone to considerable expense to produce those, and that's what we use. We encourage those uses in our green bins, so that was my concern, but it's something that we'll have to work on. And the other concern was about the brown paper bags, because they consume way more than plastic does and produces 80% more emissions than plastic bags do. So I kind of find that interesting, and we got that from Paul Manley when he came to speak to us before about that. And it was just in the Globe and Mail, the new thing on there too. But I mean, I will support it, because I think those that are opposed to it have very big, deep pockets, and they can challenge the bylaws they've done in other places if they so desire. Thank you.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. And I know this has been on the table for a long time, but the Chamber did do quite extensive work getting feedback from the business community, et cetera, in 2019. I did want to reiterate, as the mayor spoke to earlier, because we have had concerns from some citizens around the restriction. And to say that Section 3 does not limit or restrict the sale of bags, including plastic bags intended for use at the customer's home or business, provided that they are sold in packages of multiple bags. So we're not getting rid of plastic yet. This is just a baby step in our work to improving the environment and leaving a healthier earth for our grandchildren. So I love how this bylaw is written up. I think it's simplistic and understandable, and it's a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Speaking as the councillor who probably was the least enthusiastic about this bylaw, I took it upon myself to do a great effort to try to limit the usage of bags, period. So when I go to the grocery store, and of course over the last year or so I've done virtually that all by myself, I never asked for a bag. I had a box in the car and I just put it all back in the cart and loaded it in the box, and everything worked just fine. So, you know, for those who are concerned about not having bags to haul their groceries out to the car, there is an easier way of doing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Turley. Councillor Bonner, then Councillor Gesselbrock, and then maybe we can vote.
Thank you, Worship. I want to thank Councillor Gesselbach for bringing this forward to us. I think it's a great step in the right direction. Sets our city up as being part of leadership on this front. To Councillor Thorpe's comment about uptake, if it hadn't been for COVID, most of the grocery stores that I know started doing this almost from day one, where they started charging for plastic bags, and you could use your recyclables, and a lot of them took that up. I also did some research on biodegradable bags, and Mr. Sims is quite right. They're not really biodegradable. The reference they have on the green ones that are being used by some of the grocery stores can only be composted in a commercial facility, of which we have one. So if you were to throw them in your compost and then it gets taken out by the city, it'll get composted. But if you were to put it in your backyard compost, it'll still be there years from now. So it's sort of compostable, but only under certain conditions. Thanks.
Councillor Gesselbrock, the last word.
Thank you, Your Worship. This bylaw has been a long time coming. It's survived public consultation, Supreme Court challenges, a global pandemic, and going through the provincial approval process. And I think it has withstood the test of time, and despite being a small step, regulating single-use checkout bags, I think it is a symbolic step that we need to take a step back and eliminate unnecessary waste, take responsibility for more wisely managing our resources, and really rethinking this whole concept of single use, because at the end of the day, it takes energy to produce these items and they don't simply disappear. And with a habit change of using something that's reusable, that can eliminate the greenhouse gas issues associated with it, the pollution to our environment, and potentially support more sustainable industries. I think that this is the way that we need to move and a direction worth heading in. So I appreciate the patience of community members that brought this forward 2-3 years ago in the last council, and the time it takes to grind through the system. I appreciate the patience of staff, and I really appreciate the open-mindedness of council members as well that may not have been immediately on board, but see the value in this. And so I think that, this is symbolic in a lot of ways, and I'm so glad to see this get done. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gesselbrock. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Next, the bylaw status sheet is for information only. No notices of motion. Under other business, we have 3 pieces of correspondence. The first, Ms. Robertson.
Thank you. The first item is a letter from the Regional District of Nanaimo. They're conveying the resolution that the board supported at its January 26th meeting, wherein they're writing to the Honorable Sheila Malcolmson requesting that adequate levels of treatment, recovery, detox, and aftercare facilities and complex care housing for their citizens be built within the RDN. They have provided a copy of their letter and are requesting that council also send a similar letter as part of a collective and unified endeavor to bring these matters to the forefront of the provincial agenda.
Given that we have sent a letter in similar terms sometime before and probably on several occasions, and the public cries, I think, by many members of this council for the navigation center and similar facilities, I don't need a motion to write a letter along the lines of the RDN unless someone wants to make the motion, but otherwise, unless I hear a protest from council members, I'll do up another one to follow it along and remind the province that we're delighted to have the prospect of a facility for complex care in the city of Nanaimo, let alone the regional district. I'm looking around, I'm not seeing any protests, so. Councillor Brown, sorry, waving in your tiny little corner
Yes.
there.
Thank you, Worship. I would actually like to move. I do think these letters, it's important that they have the weight of council behind it. So I would like to move that a similar letter be sent to the appropriate minister.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Hemmens. Is there any need for discussion?
I will.
Sorry, Councillor Martman.
Thank you. And I understand that we have written, but I think if we're piggybacking on supporting the RDN and the complex care and that, I don't think it will hurt for us to write another letter.
And I noticed that the motion passed by the regional district was that correspondence be sent, adequate levels of care, et cetera, et cetera. So, having seen that, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is correspondence from Councillor Hamilton, City of Courtenay Help Cities Lead Campaign.
This particular letter, they're asking that council support the sample resolution as attached to the agenda and write a letter in support of the Help Cities Lead campaign that identifies a suite of measures that will enable local governments to take effective action on reducing greenhouse gas emissions from new and existing buildings. And they're asking that the letter be sent to the Minister of Environment, the Minister of Finance, Minister of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation, and the Attorney General and Minister responsible for housing.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. The two upcoming letters result from initiatives regarding looking to address greenhouse gas emissions from buildings and recognizing that the municipalities play an important role in that. They're two separate but related requests for the province to provide some enabling legislation that give municipalities more tools and options to do so. I would like to move the recommendations put forward in these letters to endorse the initiatives and send a letter of support into the province to the identified ministers. Speaking to the Help Cities Lead initiative, quick summary, the Help Cities Lead campaign identifies a suite of measures that'll enable local governments to take effective action on reducing GHG's emissions from new and existing buildings. There's 5 regulatory measures that have been identified where additional authority would be instrumental for municipalities in accelerating climate action. So these additional authorities would be regulating GHG emissions from new buildings, home energy labeling, property assessed clean energy PACE enabling legislation, that's outlined in the accompanying letter, regulating GHG emissions for existing buildings, and building energy benchmarking and reporting. So basically, the request is that we endorse these initiatives and the request to the province to give these additional authorities, and then it's voluntary whether we decide to engage in it or not. And so I'm curious if council would entertain a motion to endorse and write a letter, or do we need a notice of motion on this?
Councillor Turley, do you wish to speak to this now before any motion?
Yes, I have a question for clarification of the letter from Pace BC to Mayor and Council dated January the 18th of this year. Is it okay to ask that question now, or, okay? So the third paragraph starts, Pace programs allow property owners to borrow money, blah, blah, blah. The loan is paid back on the owner's property tax bill. So that kind of leads my thought process, and hopefully I'm wrong, that the city is providing the funding for the loans in the first place, or just how is that designed to work?
They're together.
The pace is mentioned in the first letter. So I mean, it's a relevant question. It's more fully addressed in the third item. And so the PACE program it's an initiative that's been used, across the United States. And I think there's been some pilot municipalities in BC, but basically it allows property owners to borrow money. They can invest into a broad spectrum of retrofit energy buildings. So the loan is paid back on the owner's property tax bill. And I think Councillor Brown could give more details on exactly like what the loan is provided by, but I think it allows for borrowing off of the assessed value.
Yeah, but my question, Councillor Gressberg, is who are you borrowing the money from, to put it simplistically? Is this a bank or a credit union or the city? Because I don't understand why you're repaying on your tax bill if it's from the bank.
My understanding of it, and someone will correct me if I'm wrong, is that the letter itself and the motion being sought and asked would enable, if cities choose to do so, if the provincial government passes the legislative authority, would enable a city to loan to a homeowner monies to make these kinds of improvements. It would form a first charge on the property along with taxes. I mean, right now, if any of you default on your taxes on your home, regardless of whether you've got a mortgage, first, second, third, or fourth, that will get foreclosed off potentially, in a sense, in any tax sale. This loan that the city would make, only if it chose to do so, to you as the homeowner, would remain a first charge on the property ahead of all other charges and be part of your tax bill, so to speak.
So if I could ask further, that would imply to me that the city may or may not have enough financial wherewithal, if this has got big uptake, to be able to fund this.
City doesn't have to do it. It would be entirely
I know they
a
don't
choice.
have to, but if we have a council that decides they need to do it, or in the, concern over GHGs, they decide that we have to do it, where's the money going to come from?
No, it's not. The requested legislation is not to force the city to do it. A city would have the choice to make that loan. In other words, it would be a decision of the council of the city, not the province, that would make the choice to loan the monies if they chose to engage in that kind of a program. Now, I must tell you
understand that part.
Yeah, I must tell you, from my perspective, as a lawyer with some experience in this area, I would guarantee that if this kind of legislation were passed, the first thing that would happen is that the bank's standard mortgages would provide that no borrower would be entitled to engage in this kind of borrowing from a city without the consent of the mortgage holder, because they will not see a greater charge ahead of their mortgage than property taxes themselves. And there would be a provision that if the city chose to force parties to a tax sale, because the bank would in addition have the authority to pay it rather than see the property going to tax sale or something of that nature. I mean, I'm not trying to make this overly complex. What we're being asked to do tonight by way of a motion is just to ask the province if they'll give municipalities this kind of authority and look at it. Any further questions, Councillor Turley, before I go to...
I'm still not satisfied, but that's okay.
Won't be the first person who said that to me. Councillor Gesselbrock.
I believe Councillor Brown's got his hand up.
Actually, Councillor, I'll let you go next, Councillor Brown, even though you're not zooming tonight on my screen.
Oh, okay. To answer Councillor Turley's questions, there's a variety of schemes that can be conceptualized through PACE enabling legislation, but by far the most successful PACE programs to date are where the private lender provides the financial investment. The reason for that is it essentially taps into, an unlimited capital source to see that program through. Where PACE is successful, it does take into account, the lenders, and because, essentially you're borrowing against the equity of the asset, right? So there's successful programs totally account for, the things like the mortgage lender tapping into a lot of capital to see the program be successful. So at this point, the ask is just to have the province start to look at enabling PACE programs or municipalities to have PACE programming. And there's a lot of examples that they could draw upon to make sure that it's a good investment, and it's a financially sound investment for the lender and also for the homeowner, and that it doesn't place burden on the municipality if something tragic happens with the loan.
Councillor Gesselbrock, do you want to speak more to it, or can we get to the?
I've got a motion to move regarding it, but.
Okay, we'll go to Councillor. Shall we let Councillor Gesselbrock move?
So in the letters, there was a template for an endorsement motion, and so I will just read out that motion. It's a little bit long in terms of the ministers listed, but I'll abbreviate that section. That the City of Nanaimo write a letter to the appropriate ministers expressing its endorsement of the Help Cities Lead campaigns, support for the direction set out in the November 2020 ministerial mandate letters regarding GHG requirements for new buildings, PACE financing, and home energy labeling, and also requesting that the province empower local governments to opt to take action, if they so choose, on the two remaining items of the Help City Leads campaign, namely GHG requirements for existing buildings and building energy benchmarking.
And the seconder, Councillor Hemmens. Then we'll go to Councillor Hemmens, Armstrong, Thorpe, Turley, and Gesselbrock in order.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support the motion, and I've actually seen PACE work in Nova Scotia, and it was quite successful. There was quite a bit of uptake and excitement. So happy to see this happening in BC.
Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I'll support the motion as well, because it's just asking for us to advocate for it, and then should the measures be granted, which we all know will be 2 or 3 years down the line minimum, we can then look at what would look like for our city, because we could actually, I'm assuming, you could probably even put caps on the amount you would allow to borrow against it. So from my perspective, I think it's a really good step in the right direction, and give us the option at least. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not opposed to this, and I will support it, I believe, but I do have a hesitation or a mild concern, and that is certainly looking at the first letter. I note that it's written to us from an individual councillor. It's not from a city council. It's not from a local government. It's from one member of an advocacy group. And I might appreciate that advocacy, but I'm just wondering about the type of precedent that this request sets for us in terms of requests from other advocacy groups, and how do we handle those requests in future? It's not something I think we've had to deal with very often, but it's a concern of mine that this might open the door for requests from any number of groups or individuals that wish our council's support for their initiatives, however worthy they might be. So as I say, I will support this, but that aspect of it does cause me some discomfort. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. So further to my concerns, I am more comfortable with the thought that was just recently mentioned by, I believe, Councillor Gesselbrock, that the city would be a guarantor of the loan as opposed to the provider of the loan, if that's a possibility at the time. So, thank you.
And Councillor Marvin.
Thank you. I definitely am in support of this, and basically we're just requesting that the province empower local governments to opt to take action on certain decisions. So I just wanted to state that I'm in support. Thank you.
If I may say, I agree with Councillor Thorpe's concern around this because I am the one who most frequently uses the phrase around this table. I think I'm safe in saying that, sticking to our knitting. Having said that, this is merely a request to the province to consider providing enabling legislation. Whether any council, ours or any council after chooses to proceed will depend firstly on whether the province ever passes the legislation, which will probably be dependent on whether or not the UBCM would endorse the concept, and who knows if that'll happen. And it'll be up to councils to make the decision. But I think it's an idea that is worth considering. It's consistent with our strategic plan, one of our 4 pillars. It's consistent with, I think, the growing sense of concern amongst everyone in the community of every political stripe around climate change, and I don't think we have to think much further south in the state of Texas and what they're enduring right now. So I think it's simply a positive reflection of a thoughtful council that's asking the provincial government to consider the possibility of this being successful. I'm much pleased to hear from Councillor Hemmens, who has some experience with this, having seen it work back east, in a province where heating homes is often a much more problematic issue than it is in the city of Victoria or the city of Nanaimo. So all those in favor? Any contrary? Seeing none, thank you very much. Motion carries. I don't think it's necessary to deal with any...
Well, just not to be confusing to everybody, but there's 2 letters, and what the first one, the Help Cities Lead initiative, is one that's addressing sort of like 5 enabling legislative changes around GHG and building, and then the second letter is actually specifically just asking for support around the PACE BC, which has gotten the majority of our attention this evening, and confirming that we would have interest in the program when and if it should become available. And so I would like to move this very simple, that the City of Nanaimo write a letter to the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Energy Mines, and Low Carbon Innovation, and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, Housing, and PACE BC, expressing support for BC legislation enabling PACE by third-party administration and confirming City of Nanaimo's interest in having a PACE program when it becomes available.
Seconded by Councillor Martman. I will throw out this question. The decision whether or not to support the legislation is a decision that has to be made by the council of the day when it comes before that council. I don't know that it's appropriate for us, as much as it seems innocuous, to support a motion saying that council will support something before council has actually had anything in front of it. What we're being asked for in the first motion was to provide a letter of support for the concept, but this motion goes a little bit further, basically saying that we would support the legislation in the sense that we would commit to carrying it out. And I have some concerns with that, and I'm looking to Ms. Robertson or Mr. Lindsay or Mr. Rudolph if I'm perhaps being overly concerned with this.
Firstly, I think Councillor Gelsbrook wishes to respond to that, and I don't know if I have an opinion on that. I mean, any future, just because a council says it's committing to something now doesn't mean it can't be undone at a future time. It's similar to a conversation I think we had earlier about resolutions where you could undo the resolution if you so chose. So I don't think you're committed to it. You're just saying you are, but you could change your mind. You're committed to an OCP when you adopt it, but you're not necessarily, you can make amendments to that. So I'm not sure it's as challenging as it may feel, but it's just a tone difference.
Councillor Gesselbrock, then Thorpe, then Armstrong.
Thank you, Worship. Maybe to help just clarify things and alleviate any concerns. The reason why there's 2 letters is it's two separate organizations. This letter was sent specifically from the organization called PACE BC. So myself, Councillor Brown, are sitting on the Climate Advisory Technical Committee for the Regional District of Nanaimo. The Environment Committee. PACE has been something that's been brought up over and over again as something that would be a useful tool for municipalities to have to sort of lower the barrier to allow retrofits. Now, there is a organization that has been started by different individuals involved in municipalities to promote the idea of PACE in BC and to get this legislation put through, and also be the sort of administrative body once the legislation's through to help administer this program in the municipalities. This organization is working on getting this legislation through the provincial government, and they're sending out a letter saying like, hey, municipalities, is this something that's important to you? If so, can you send us a letter to say that you care about it so that, you know, we've got a little bit of weight when we talk to the different ministers to like get action on this. That's basically what this letter is asking for. Mr. Rudolph is right, you know, we could have these changes at the province, and it's still going to be up to the council of the day to say, hey, do we want to have this program here or not? And they've got every right to make that decision. What's being asked about this council is like, do we think this is a good idea, and do we want to show our support in the process of just getting things changed at the provincial level? These are simple letters of advocacy, and we're not being bound to anything, you know, or binding future councils to anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. This has devolved into a confusing conversation regarding these letters. And I was willing to support the first letter with the reservation that I expressed. I'm not prepared to support the wording that Councillor Geselbrock just put forward on this letter. Again, this might be a program which is worthwhile, and in principle, in general, I'd be willing to ask the government to consider endorsing it, but to actually say that our council will take part in this is going a step too far for me. So this has come from an advocacy group again, or an activism group, and that's nice. But to commit our council to, and I recognize, of course, we can change course, or future councils are not bound by what we do today. But even so, I think that wording is too strong for me, and I'm not prepared to go that far. Thanks.
Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I can't support it the way it's written either, because I don't have enough information. I don't know if all of a sudden legislation came in tomorrow, we've already told the government that we will do it, yet we don't even know what the cost will be. So, because to me, that motion says that we will do it. And I don't agree with that. I have no problem saying that we express an interest in looking at this, but not that we will do it. You see, I didn't hear express an interest. Ms. Roberts, could you please?
Ms. Robertson, if you could read the resolution.
No, support is different.
The resolution is that the City of Nanaimo write a letter to the Ministry of Environment, the Minister of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, Minister of Housing, Enabling and PACE BC, expressing support for BC legislation enabling PACE by third-party administration and confirming City of Nanaimo's interest in having a PACE program when it becomes available.
I just have to think about confirming an interest in having.
And confirming City of Nanaimo's interest in having a PACE program when it becomes available.
Okay, if interest, that's okay. I can handle that, because we can always change our minds. I don't agree with committing a council to this, because now it's another motion that sits on the books for staff to have to monitor and keep, when I would prefer to see the motion after the government gives you the legislation, but thank you.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I will support the motion, and it's about sending a letter of support, and it's about saying that this council of the day is looking to support PACE if it passed in legislation. We as a council at the beginning of our term talked about a climate emergency. I think whatever actions we can take or advocate for our citizens and for improving, whether it's building or plastic or whatever it may be, water, that we take those actions. And I think this one is simply a letter of support and saying we're definitely interested in doing what we can if a PACE program is initiated by legislation. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock, did you want to say anything further? Are you okay? If not, all those in favor of the motion? Those contrary? Councillors Turley and Thorpe. And Councillor Brown, you were in favor, I assume? Motion carries. Thank you very much. A motion for adjournment. Moved, Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone.